2 years ago, my best friend Emma went missing from a hotel. I've been looking for her ever since. I'm sharing this because if I don't come back, well, the more people that know what happened, the better. Maybe then, someone will finally believe me. Every year since our college graduation, Emma and I would take a summer vacation together and visit a new city. As we began planning our trip for late summer 2021, Emma received an email saying she'd earned a free week-long stay at a new hotel. She travels a lot for business, so it's not unusual for Emma to receive extra free hotel stays. One of the hotel locations she could redeem was somewhere we had never stayed before, and it looked extra fancy. It sounded perfect. However, as soon as we walked into the lobby, something felt off. I don't know how to explain it other than that it had weird vibes. It looked like the old hotel had recently been renovated, but it felt like someone had tried to cover up decades' worth of caked-on misery. The air just felt so heavy. Emma didn't seem to notice it, at least not at first. The guy at the hotel check-in desk stared at us for a while before muttering that he needed to talk to his manager. We were a bit worried that we were about to hear that the email she'd received had been a scam. But to our relief, he came back with a grin and said they'd upgraded our hotel room. That first day was fine, but when I woke up the next morning, Emma sat motionless on her bed, with her back to me. Emma? I repeated her name several times before finally walking over to tap her on the shoulder. Hey, are you okay? She finally turned to me and spoke quietly, as if someone else might be listening. Emma, looking spooked, asked me, "Did you hear it last night?" I shook my head, no. "Oh," she said. Emma looked embarrassed for a moment, like she was unsure of what she heard the night before. "I couldn't sleep, not with the scratching behind the wall," Emma whispered to me. "I don't like it. I didn't hear anything. I'm a heavy sleeper. At home, where it's just me, I have to set multiple alarms to ensure I wake up on time for work. Emma was the opposite. Every little noise would wake her, so she always tended to have a rough first night or two as she became accustomed to the new sounds of a place. Maybe after a few nights, I thought Emma would get used to it, or chalk it up to the hotel building settling, especially in such an old place. I offered to ask for a different room, but Emma was worried they'd charge us. She said she would try and ignore it. The day before we were supposed to check out, though, Emma shook me awake. Her eyes were wide and frantic as she stood over me. Emma moved her nightstand aside and was pointing at a small door, 3 or so feet tall, that had been behind it. The door was old-looking, dark wood with an antique knob, and stood in contrast to everything else in the bright and modern-looking room. I asked her, "Did you open it?" Emma looked at me like I was out of my mind for even asking, and backed away as I approached it, for good measure. I figured that once we looked, we'd both feel better. But I was wrong. As I carefully pushed it open, the smell of rust and bleach hit me immediately. The narrow space was long. It went further back than my phone light could reach from where I stood. And after a few feet, it faded into blackness. Since the room was only as tall and wide as the small door, I realized I'd have to crawl on my hands and knees to see how far it went back. I hate being in the dark and can't stand small spaces. But when I looked over my shoulder at Emma and saw the bags under her eyes, the expression on her face, I figured I owed it to her to at least take a look. So I crawled in. Once a few feet inside, I saw that the small and narrow space ended at another wall, one plastered in yellow wallpaper. It looked so old. I guessed it was probably a part of the original hotel. The dark, patterned carpet was dotted with stains, which seemed to be contributing to at least part of the strong smell. As I backed out, I thought I heard a faint whisper coming from behind the old wallpaper in front of me. As soon as I was out, I had to fight the urge to shut the door and run. It felt so wrong in there. I wasn't sure what the purpose of that space had once been, but even then, I knew it was nothing good. "Hey," I whispered to Emma as soon as I closed the door, as I tried to move the end table back in front of it quietly. "Why don't we pack up? We can find a different hotel for tonight." Emma seemed calmer and said she could hang in there for the final night. After having been in that small space behind our wall, the thought of sleeping there another night honestly freaked me the hell out. But I figured that if she could make it through the last night, then so could I. After we turned out the lights that night, I remember seeing Emma's dark silhouette sitting motionless on the edge of her bed until I fell asleep. That was the last time I ever saw Emma. When I woke up, it was almost noon. Our alarms were blaring. We were supposed to check out hours earlier. My confusion quickly turned to panic when I realized Emma wasn't in the room. Her suitcase, purse, phone, everything was still there. The main door was locked and chained from the inside, too. At first, I couldn't think of where else she could be until it hit me. There was one place I hadn't checked. The nightstand was still in front of the door, but I was fairly certain it was in a slightly different spot than we had left it the day before. Reluctantly, I slid it aside. "Emma?" I yelled. No answer. She wasn't there. I did see, though, that what I'd thought had been a wall was opened slightly. I pushed it slightly and took a sharp breath when I saw it led into a tunnel. It went so far back, far beyond the reach of the beam of my phone light. It looked endless. "Emma?" I yelled again. I got no response except my voice echoing through the narrow space. I tried to tell myself that it would be okay. I had to go in, especially if Emma had gone in there too. I took a deep breath, nudged the false wall open all the way, and I entered. As I crawled on my hands and knees, with my phone ungracefully held between my teeth, I tried not to think about the tight space and the pitch blackness as far as I could see in front of me, or picture what Emma would have been doing down there. I tried not to focus on the streaks of nearly dried blood along the floor. I had to keep going. I knew that Emma would do the same for me. I realized I wasn't sure how long she had been gone. I promised myself the walls were not shrinking around me. It was my imagination that this dark expanse couldn't go on forever, and the tight darkness would eventually end. I repeated it to myself repeatedly as a mantra, just to keep myself going, to try and distract myself from the feeling of despair that seemed to fill the place. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel ended, opening into a room without lights or windows. but it was at least large enough that I could stand and stretch out my cramped muscles. All I could make out was wall-to-wall dark, crumbling bricks and a weak-looking set of stairs that led above and below. It was so quiet there, so eerie. It was easy to forget that I was in a city packed with people, still inside a busy hotel. When I shined my light upwards into the pitch blackness above my head, I could see the stairs leading to other platforms, like the one I was standing on. It looked like the rooms above and below ours had similar tunnels. The smell of bleach had long been replaced by mildew and old things. It felt so wrong back there that I couldn't put my finger on that. I couldn't help but shiver when wondering why it had been designed that way. What had it been used for? I assumed the stairs to the tunnels above me led to other rooms, so I went down, the protesting metal echoing up into the empty space above my head. I finally reached a heavy door, and after being in the dark for so long, the bright sunlight hurt my eyes when I opened it. I was looking into the back alley outside, around the corner from where the hotel seemed to end. The door was covered with the same bricks as the rest of the building. It was so discreet that when I closed it behind me, it blended in perfectly with the outside wall. I remember running back inside and bracing myself against the counter while I tried to convey what I'd found to anyone who would listen. I still have the image in my mind of how the dried blood on my palms stood out starkly on the white marble. It was all I could focus on as the manager tried to calm me down. He said Emma had probably just wandered off. He told me that people go off on their own all the time to explore the city. She'd likely come back later. She never did. I was the one who called the police, and the officer who came out chatted casually with the hotel manager for a long time. They checked the room. I showed him the door, but he didn't seem concerned. He repeated what the manager said. Maybe she decided to start over and didn't want to be found. I was hysterical and pointed out that her purse and phone were still in the room. She hadn't even taken her shoes. It's not uncommon, he told me, leaning in a little too close. A warning less subtle than his words was written across his face. For people to visit a city like this and never leave. I drove around for hours, asking shop owners and people outside if they'd seen her. None of them had. Eventually, I had to go back home to work. The official story is that Emma just left of her own volition. I don't believe it. Neither does her family or fiancé. Every so often, he and I would drive up there on the off chance that anyone had seen her, but we'd always get the same answer. He's the one who had the idea to book the same room again to see what we could find in the tunnels. He must have called dozens of times. He'd try to make a reservation, ask if room 347 or any of the ones directly above it were available, and they'd always tell him no. We hadn't lost all hope, but we'd certainly lost most of it. Until a few days ago, I recently received an email invite letting me know I'd earned a free week, just like the one Emma received 2 years ago. I went to check in, and after looking me over, the guy manning the desk said he needed to get his manager. The manager, the same one as before, came out in person, and I was so worried he turned me away. But he simply smiled and informed me that my room had been upgraded. I'm sure you can guess my room number, 347. I've been trying to stay awake each night. Although, after everything that happened, I wouldn't be able to fall asleep here, even if I wanted to. I've just been sitting in the dark every night, listening to the sounds coming from behind that awful door. Sounds that I could almost swear are a bit louder, a bit closer, each night. I'm supposed to check out tomorrow morning. I feel that tonight, I'll finally find out what happened to Emma. Wish me luck.